All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. First, want to mention, please, if you can take a moment to participate in our poll. We'd just love to know what side of the industry you're joining us from. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to address them as we go along here. My name is Ian Davis. I'm the marketing manager here at Sessionboard, and I'm really excited for this discussion. Today's conversation is meant to be candid with the end goal of sparking some inspiration that will hopefully propel you forward on your journey in the events industry. We have three awesome guests here today that can share their own unique perspective on developing a career in this competitive landscape. Combined, they have seen just about every aspect of an event, from the buyer side to the supplier side, and from marketing to strategy to execution. You name it, they've seen it. Through all of their experience, they have each become event strategists in their own right. So first, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers and pass it off to them to do so. Megan Martin, you want to take the reins here?
Awesome. Thanks, Ian. Glad to be here with Molly and Megan. We're the 3M effect, clearly, this morning, afternoon, wherever you're joining from. But I am Megan Martin, Director of Partnerships and Events for Sessionboard. And as Ian mentioned, I have kind of jumped around this industry in a number of different areas. I actually started in this industry in college as an intern for a sports council, so in the CVB side. Then I worked for a venue, a convention center, and was the CSM. Then went into association work and ran a number of medical citywides, did some stint in government, then went to corporate for a little bit, and then now on the supplier, quasi-supplier event side, doing a little bit of both for Sessionboard. But I love being on the event tech side of things. But I think my planning experience has made me a better event tech provider because I truly understand what planners are looking for, because I've sat on both sides of the aisle and both sides of this industry. So I think it has made me a better planner because I understand a little bit more on all the sides, and it makes me a lot more compassionate for the work that we all do, especially for our vendors. But Megan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Megan. I do love the 3Ms. This is great. My name is Megan Sod. I am an account executive at Sessionboard. And just like Megan, I was previously on the other side. So I moved to the DC area after college and fell into the association space. Frankly, I had never even knew it was an option prior to moving to the DC area. And I was in marketing. So I was in event marketing for the National Contract Management Association's annual event. And that's really where I fell in love with the event industry and bringing people together. From there, I went on to be the marketing director at IAPA, the Association for the Attractions Industry, where I was responsible for bringing the right buyers to their trade shows and events around the world. So really fun industry. I was happy that was my second association experience. And then from there, I came over to the supplier side. So fairly recently, but just like Megan, I don't think that without my perspective and experience on the end user and buyer side, I would be as good at talking with prospects and understanding their pain points and challenges that they had, and really understanding where the tech can fit in and help them. And then lastly, Molly.
Well, thank you to Sessionboard and the Megans and Ian for including me. I might have a few more years on the other two, but I've really found a cohort here of people that are exploring different sides of our industry. So I'm glad we're talking about this today. I've been in the industry about 17 years, maybe at this point. I started at a big third party, which was called carve, then Experience, now Merits. Did planning there for about 5 years, registration, moved to a large medical association where I also did planning on the annual meeting called American Dental Association. I'm sure you've seen it on your toothpaste. I did that for about 10 years, and then I flipped, I guess you could say, sides. And a lot of people were like, wow, you're leaving planning to be a supplier. I'm like, all these things interest me, so why don't I go try that side? So I worked at a tech startup called Evid that did spend management and events and got exposed to finance people, marketing people, got to wear a lot of hats, got to try sales, did account management and marketing. Then moved back to Merits in my first hunter role, which is a little scary. So we're going to talk about the journeys today. But really glad I had that under my belt. Happened to do that during the time we won't speak of, which was COVID. So jumped into digital, continued to just follow my passions and interests. Moved on from there to a role that got created for me at QuestX, which is in the for-profit space. So another new sector for me, working across 5 different markets, 70 plus shows of different formats, and really melding together attendee engagement strategy for their company. And since then, they phased out that role. And so I have my own business now called Measured Meeting Strategies. Thank you. So I'm trying my hand at that, where I'm kind of melding all of my experiences across supplier, planner, the different things I've done in my career. And really, I'm able to speak to voice of the customer, similar to the Megans, because I have been the customer. So it's a unique position to be able to kind of help companies on both sides of the coin with either event strategy or sales strategy or whatever it might be. So it's an exciting time. So thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, we're excited you could join us here with our 2 Megans. So looking at the poll, it looks like we have a decent amount of planners, some both, a supplier, and then a few that are looking to potentially switch here. Yeah, so first topic we want to dive into is ultimately what it means and what it takes to make the jump from a planner to a strategist. I don't know if Megan or Megan, you want to kick that off for us?
I'm happy to kick us off here. And I think Molly said something interesting that I think is what really made us all really powerful strategists in this space, is following her interests. And that's something very similar, like coming out of the time that shall not be named. I was kind of ready to do something different, and planning, just like everyone else, was getting completely burned out from the time and everything, and the dreaded P word of pivoting left and right every other day. And I leaned into what was the most interesting part of my job, which was the technology and the event tech side of things. And I mean, that's kind of what I've always realized I did in my career, is same as Molly, is just kind of leaned into the parts that were most interesting to me. And I think that's what makes us all very good strategists, is because we didn't just get a job, stay in that job. Like if it wasn't interesting to me, then I kind of moved on and found something that was. And it made me very well-rounded. And because I've sat on a lot of different corporate event planning jobs, association citywide jobs, in sales as an account executive, now doing partnerships and back in the event planning seat, like again, I have so much compassion and empathy for all the other parts that go into making our shows and events so successful, that I now can wear multiple hats at the same time and really come up with a holistic approach that everyone can kind of get a little bit of what they're looking for out of the event.
I told you guys before this started that my dog was like definitely going to wake up. And here he is. So hopefully he doesn't bark. Hopefully nothing gets delivered. So for me, I think that strategist really comes from understanding how to break down silos. I was lucky, it was a blessing and a curse, that the marketing department often has to interface with everyone in order to execute the event. So that was really helpful in understanding each department's challenges. But so often at organizations, there are silos where they're not speaking to one another, and understanding where they can bridge gaps, and really create processes just to create better efficiency. So again, the P words, but I think the pandemic, if we're trying to find some silver lining, it was this push that everyone had to face for digital transformation. Associations sometimes have a reputation of being a little, dated and old school in their processes. Like
I like to think of them as late adopters.
Okay, late adopters is a nicer way to put it. But it got everyone talking. IAPA was really lucky in having year-over-year growth, and everything was good. So it was like, it's working, let's not change anything. And so this was a shakeup that I think was needed for innovation and just evolution, as far as, reinventing the wheel a little bit, not just from a planning perspective, but from an attendee and experiential perspective too. So I agree with Megan and Molly that without this experience and working across different teams, I don't think I would have the perspective to call myself a true strategist. It's really, holding on to a spirit of collaboration and, understanding everyone's goals and challenges to understand what can become, a thread in really just executing an event that works for everyone and creates an awesome experience.
And I think if I could be so bold to say, I think, we come out of that period and we maybe go back to some of the things we were doing before, which were working really well. But I do think we'll see a time where we'll need to keep thinking forward and thinking of what we want to do with our audiences and ways that we can get some of those more logistical things off our plate by either implementing new systems or softwares or whatever it might be. I'm guessing many of the planners on this call, you've likely had a big idea, you've likely wanted to change something, and sometimes you're just stuck in that more of the monotonous tasks. And so I think we're seeing push from leaders, push from volunteer leadership, push from wherever you're working to really drive that ROI and figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And I think it's important to ask those questions. I love to be organized. I love those planning aspects. I love a good spreadsheet. There's something so satisfying about checking things off. But I always found in my planning days, at least, I was always looking at that big picture and kind of the why and the what. And I think we're seeing more and more in our industry that shift to need to show what we're doing in that realm. So I think that's really important. I think also, Megan and I were talking about her entering into a sales role like I did a few years ago. And I always called it solutioning. I never called it sales. And I said, I think that's something that makes it unique if you've been the buyer and the seller of similar products, is you don't really want to sell to anyone, you more want a solution. So if anybody on this call is thinking, how do I translate planning skills to sales or account management, or maybe the vice versa? What if you're on sales and you want to be a planner? It's very transferable to think about strategies that affect both because you've walked in those shoes. So I'd encourage you to, if you're at all thinking about it, you've got some support on this call. But
well, I think a lot of planners are suppliers, or are salespeople already. Like if you mentioned, Molly, like you have this great idea, but you have to get that approved by a board of directors, or maybe your boss or an executive director, top of the food chain. Like you have to sell that, you have to pitch it. So like the skills are all there. You just maybe don't think of it as sales, but like really at the end of the day, you still are. You're still recruiting people to come to your events. You're still marketing to them. All of that is sales. It's just not called sales in the planner world.
Yeah, exactly. And when I first heard about Sessionboard, it was from my now colleague, Andrew Asaro. And when he was explaining it to me at an industry event, I was like, wow, I wish I would have had that at IAPA. And I immediately thought of the value for not only planners, but the education managers and the sales teams and the marketing departments. So again, going back to breaking down silos, that's going to help communicate the ROI. If you're not the main, purchaser, you need to justify the expense to leadership. That's just going to make it a more compelling pitch, if you will. We're all in sales at the end of the day, right? To who you need to get that approval from.
Well, and I think you make a great point, Megan, and thinking about moving from planner to strategist. Like, as Molly mentioned, we all love a spreadsheet. Planners are some of the most organized people on the planet, yet we still get so sucked into the weeds and the operations and the execution of our events. And when you're so busy just checking stuff off the list to make sure things are getting done and executing well, you can very quickly lose sight of the big picture, as Molly mentioned. So I think when you can bring in different technologies that kind of help automate and streamline some of those workflows, your brain can stop focusing on, okay, I have to do this, and then I have to do that, and then I have to do that. And we can say, do all of those four things even make sense? Are we, every association has those sacred cows that they're never going to get rid of at their events. And unless you can take a step back and look at it from the 40,000 foot view, you're always just going to keep doing it. You're going to stay in the weeds. Your brain is just strictly going to focus on the operational execution of it. And you won't be able to make that leap from planner to strategist because you're still so focused on the spreadsheets and operations, where that stuff can get automated now. And the silver lining of the pandemic is we got a seat at the table. Don't let them kick that chair out from under us. Like, they're finally listening. Events have a spotlight on them in a very healthy way. And now is the time to, as I like to say, from party planner to strategist, or from the stewardess to flight attendant, right? Like, making that move from strictly admin persona, if you will, to the C-suite.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that makes me think, so all these different roles you guys have individually had in different spaces in the event industry on different sides, I'm imagining that like networking played a huge part in that. So can you speak to like developing, building, cultivating a diverse professional network? Has that helped? And if so, what are some strategies in that regard?
Molly, you're probably in the biggest city, so I want you to go first because your geographic network is larger than us.
We can do a road tour. I mean, I can't discount the impact of volunteerism, which is one of the ways Megan Martin and I met each other. It's just a way to get integrated into our hospitality community and just meet new people. I've always found myself from my first job on looking at people that were doing jobs that I thought looked cool and learning more about them. And that's a great way to network too. You find when you reach out to people on LinkedIn or get an introduction or something, people are pretty game to chat usually, unless they're just super busy. So that's been a big way that I've grown my network, just people that I respect what they're doing and they might be doing different things. And that's how you learn about different things you might want to do. It also helps you when you want to kind of make these leaps into different spaces. They know more about you and what you can bring to the table. And so I was always very curious in the case of like American Dental to get to know my IT department or my marketing department or membership, and just finding people in there that were doing really cool projects and figuring out ways that I could either interact on that or learn what they were doing. Same thing in the startup environment. We lost our director of marketing and I ended up being the director of marketing for a little bit. So then, you're pulling out of your network, who's marketers, who can I bring into my, to help me figure this out. And so, I always, think if you see somebody cool on a podcast, if you see somebody cool presenting, I hope whoever's on here links in with us. People are really, really game to network. And I think broadening your network outside of just the people that are planners or suppliers or whoever you just have in your backyard, in my case, Chicago. I know people all over the country, including the Megans, because of just finding really cool people that you connect with and staying in touch as you also navigate your careers. Because I think three of us met in very different jobs. So that's, not sure if it's pro tips, but I would say with any of this, don't be afraid. Like, I know it's a little scary to think about sales or networking or things like that. Know that we're a very supportive and empathetic community and all just here to support each other.
I completely agree. And I love that you touched on volunteering and how you got voluntold to be director of marketing. Like, I always use volunteering as an opportunity to learn or advance skills that I didn't get to do in my full-time job. So like, if you're an event planner, but you're super interested in marketing, get on a marketing committee for any association. It doesn't have to be in the events world. Like, join a local nonprofit that does something and get on their marketing committee. Or at one point I wanted to learn more about social media marketing. So I got on a social media committee to start learning, from other people. And, it's also a less dangerous touch point. Like, I'm not going to, shut down Twitter being a volunteer. Right. So it's, an easy entry point. And it also helped round out my resume while also building my network, because most committees are generally from across the country, sometimes even the world. So like, I've been on committees with people from literally other countries and have done podcast interviews and become good friends with people simply because I reached out on LinkedIn. They had an interesting job, wanted to learn more, and I've never actually met them in person. Like, I'm specifically thinking of someone that I'm good friends with now who lives in South Africa. We've done a few projects together and we've literally never met, only because I reached out and said, hey, we have the same job title. I want to learn more about what you're doing. Like, that was literally the start of the conversation.
Yeah, I think we all three of us can speak to the power of connections, and it is so true. At this point, and it's hindsight, and it's become very clear. But I didn't even realize, how much of a slow build over time that would really lead to this, wide ranging network of event and industry professionals that I can tap into based on a multitude of needs. And it's not just to sell to them and to become clients, it's for intros to someone else, or it's, to ideate. So there's so many opportunities that come from just being open to expanding your network. And I was lucky whenever I did enter the association space that I had an employer that was invested in my professional growth. So, as a buyer and little bit junior in my career, I was able to go to industry events where I was really just acting like a sponge and going to sessions and learning, but I didn't shy away from networking, which oftentimes you think the suppliers are the ones, going out there and making sure they're collecting all of the business cards. But it's so true. We are part of an industry that really, I think, encompasses the spirit of collaboration, but is very open to supporting and helping one another and having candid conversations. So, no matter what capacity people are in, establishing those relationships now could mean opportunity or projects, or who knows, in the future. So I think that keeping that open mind and slowly building your network over time is going to pay dividends in the future, no matter where you end up.
And just because I was looking at the attendee list while you were talking, Megan, I'm going to call out two stories just because I saw some names in there. So Sean Jung, I see you hanging out in our attendance today. So fun networking, small world story. I applied to start teaching at a university when I lived in Denver, and Sean was my teaching mentor. He taught me the ropes and all of that. And then he left and went to Purdue, and Molly now is a guest speaker with Sean quite a few times in Purdue. So that's small world. And then I also saw one of my mentees in there. And Khadija, I see floating around. She randomly reached out to me on LinkedIn, same as I've done to a few others. And now we've been working together and collaborating on some stuff for almost 2 years now. So I think I've given this advice to many students before. Like, if you reach out to someone and they're not reciprocating and they're not excited to talk to you, you don't want them in your network anyway. So move on and find someone who is.
I was just going to say, don't underestimate networking with your peer group. Like, as people journey on and you stay connected and you see where you go and how you can support each other. And I would also say, like, it doesn't stop. Like, I signed up for something in Chicago next week with people I have no clue. I saw it on LinkedIn through my network, and it's more hoteliers and like hospitality, a different sector or industry. And I'm like, why don't I just pop up? But I realize if you're more introverted, that's not as easy. Maybe bring a friend to go with you or a safe space. But I'm like, who will I meet, and what do they do? Because our industry is so large. There's so many segments, and I don't even think I scratched the surface, even though I've done many of them. So it kind of just goes on, right? So.
And that's the beauty of our industry, is like, you literally can reinvent yourself. So like, when I was getting burned out of being a meeting planner, but I didn't want to leave the industry, I just leveraged my network and went to go work for one of the vendors that I worked with. And so just flipped to the other side of the industry, leveraging that network and people that I loved and following my interests. And there's so many translatable skills, and leaning on that network. I mean, that's how I came to Sessionboard to work with Megan, is ready to do something different, wanted to get back into event planning and focus on partnerships, because I absolutely love that. And then next thing I know, here I am at Sessionboard after a couple of conversations with people in my network. Didn't even dawn on me that that would be a job opportunity, so quickly in my future, but leverage that network and the conversations, and here we go. And I know Megan Saad had a very similar journey to Sessionboard. Starts with a conversation, and it's in my LinkedIn bio for a reason. Like, I literally love connecting humans. If there was a job that was a professional networker that could just go to events and connect other people, like, that's my dream job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that brings us to the final topic there that we kind of want to hit on, which is how and why should someone consider making that leap to a different segment in the industry? I imagine it can be scary. Obviously it's empowering as well, but I'm sure there's a little bit of fear there that you have to overcome. And want to make sure you're making the right decision or a good decision. So any tips there at all?
I mean, I would say, oh, sorry, I was going to say, you want to make sure that your journey is making sense. You know, you kind of don't want to leap around to the point where people are like, whoa, what are you doing? But I do think there is an effective way to weave together your interests in companies that align with your personal values and culture and the problems you want to solve in our industry or how you want to help people into a way where, you know, even our industry organizations, I struggle to know if I should be a member as a planner or supplier because I do continue to flip back and forth. So we're not exactly there yet, but I do think people are thinking differently. And I see more and more people having journeys like what the Megans and I are doing, where they are weaving together this powerful career path of doing things that matter to them and solving the problems that they want to solve, no matter what side it's on. And I think the side thing's interesting because I can't imagine a world where you're not more effective at either side by understanding each other's perspectives. So I think it's something that we're going to see more and more, maybe in the more emerging generations. But yeah, it's exciting, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I share that. For me, the pieces fell into place. And I think sometimes you could never understand your career path or journey. I never saw myself both, in sales or in the tech industry, because that's not my background. But, after learning more about Sessionboard and really understanding the end user, that's where I started to have conversations with the team. And what really convinced me to make the leap is the team's kind of role in the process was wanting to make sure that I was, determining it a good fit for myself just as much as I was a good fit for the company. So I think that's so crucial. And I think the interview kind of process has changed and evolved to have those really candid conversations to understand and to make sure to determine that it is, a right fit for what you're passionate about, because you just want to fuel that passion and, to continue to make an impact in the industry that you serve. The biggest thing in my case was I was wondering if it was right because I was steering off from my marketing career in a sense. I had invested money and time and experience in that. I got my master's in marketing, and the leadership team at Sessionboard, their advice was, we want you to keep your marketing hat on. And I think that's so true. Like I'm not stepping away from marketing. I'm just kind of adding another layer to how I contribute to a team and to an organization. So thinking of it in that capacity made all the difference. And I really felt strongly about the product in this case with Sessionboard, but the team. So, talk to everyone you can, understand what makes them tick and really determine if you have, a seat at the table and, a place within the team that's really going to fuel you and fulfill your passion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The only nugget I'll add differently is I think the days of climbing the corporate ladder don't exist. And someone gave me this advice early in my career that has stuck with me forever. Sometimes the ladder looks more like lattice. And sometimes you have to make a lateral move to get to that next rung. And so right now I focus on climbing the lattice. My career has looked a lot more like chutes and ladders than it has a corporate ladder. I've made some wrong steps. I've gone to some wrong companies. I've taken on jobs and roles inside of organizations and then found myself in this pigeonhole of like, how did I get here? I don't even want to be doing this anymore. And that's all part of the journey. Figuring out what you don't want to do just as much as figuring out what you do want to do. Like just because I'm interested in baking doesn't mean I'm going to open a bakery tomorrow, but I have to explore that journey sometimes to figure out that decision for myself. So don't be afraid to make the leap. We've all taken missteps. We all have to learn to walk in one way or the other. So think about it more as a lattice and not a ladder.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And yeah, we're right about at time here. So if there's any other additional questions or anything, feel free to post them. We'll try to address them. We're looking at doing another webinar soon, so stay tuned for that and some follow-up content from this. But just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And any parting words from you ladies?
Take the lead.
Thanks for including me, and I hope anybody that jumped on kind of needing a boost today or support or maybe thinking a little bit differently does feel that support, because we have a great community and great network with some people, and you're all part of the family.
We want to be in your corner, so connect with us. Like, we want to support you. We'll continue the conversation, and sometimes the biggest leaps are the best rewards. So I say jump off the cliff and expect a net to catch you.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't have any parting words. Thank you, Molly, so much for joining the session board team. And like Molly said, that we plan to follow up with answering any questions, continuing the conversation. But I really appreciate the candid conversation that we're having, because I think it's so needed and something I would have really loved to have, years ago. So thank you for your input.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you to our guests here, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.